what we'll show now, Ken, show now on the screen, just a brief or a glimpse of some of the transitions and views that you have traveling along Bayshore Boulevard from from the south end to the north end of the city. This is Southeast Bayshore, which we'll be covering first as a sub-area. You can also see, however, Southwest Bayshore Boulevard, get a glimpse of the trailer park that's there, that we'll talk about briefly when we get to the Southwest Bayshore Boulevard. This is behind VWR. It shows that the southeast sub-area is kind of sandwiched between Bayshore Boulevard and the rail line, and this is a access corridor behind VWR. Across the street from on the southwest side, some of the businesses along the corridor there. Should mention that there are 2 sub-areas in addition to these 4 that touch on this. This is the edge with central Brisbane. And down beyond the shopping center, of course, where those trees start, is the state teachers retirement system parcel that we talked about a little bit when we talked about central Brisbane. This is across the street from that by the machinery building. It's a parcel that we were going to talk about at the end of the sub-areas. The reason we haven't brought it up for this meeting is the Planning Commission minutes from the meeting aren't available yet. So the Planning Commission had some good ideas about that parcel that I think you'll find interesting when we get there. This is the, go ahead, you go on, Ken. This is further down, you see Ice House Hill, the corner of the parking lot there with Brisbane Tech Park, and you can see the character of the boulevard along this way, and see Industrial Way there in the background. There's Brisbane Tech Park, character of the buildings there. This is the northwest section of the boulevard, the Levinson property. You have the Peking property, Levinson property, and then of course the Levinson Marsh before you get to the PG&E facility there and the 7 Mile House. Industrial Way from Ice House Hill, or the edge of the road nearby Ice House Hill. A little bit of what's going on there on Industrial Way, some of the businesses that are there. And that was it. We just wanted to kind of give you an overview of it's a holistic view of the boulevard as you take a look at these 4 individual sub-areas. So now we'll just go to the Southeast Bayshore sub-area. It's is an 18-acre sub-area sandwiched between the Bayshore Boulevard and the Caltrain tracks in the lagoon. It's comprised of 3 parcels, including the property occupied by VWR. The land use designation of the sub-area is trade commercial, like same for Crocker Park and the Baylands. For the most part, the sub-area is built out with 340,000 square feet of warehouse and office space. So we don't expect much new development over the horizon of the plan. VWR, of course, being one of the major employers in the city. Towards the southeast end of this sub-area, adjacent to Bayshore Boulevard, there is an informal highway pullout that provides kind of expansive views to the east. The location occupies an important gateway to the city that should be considered as a possible location for some type of monument marker emphasizing the transition from South San Francisco to Brisbane and providing an overlook perhaps for pedestrian and travelers. Anybody who's pulled out there knows it does have expansive views to the east. Just before you get there on the left side of the road, if you're coming from the south, there's a large retaining wall, rock-faced retaining wall that has a very nice character. And the thought there was perhaps some of that material could be used to construct a low wall or some kind of marker that identifies, you know, a place that pedestrians can stop or traffic can pull out, bicyclists as the bicycle plan goes forward and there's more bicycle access along there. I know we had Beth Grossman-Husband Stores at the meeting at the Planning Commission on this, and he's quite a bicyclist, and he rides along there and through there, and he was supportive of certainly the bicycle increase, bicycle infrastructure along Bayshore Boulevard. And since this area is built out, we really didn't have a lot of comments or recommendations on this area other than do new program that you see there in the matrix under Southeast Bayshore Boulevard, program 236B, which is to consider a naturalistic gateway treatment and pedestrian overlook at the southern end, and that's that area I just mentioned. So if the council would like to go at this area by area, then we would suggest that you look at land use policy 236 in the programs and 237 in the program to take any comments from the council on that. And then with each sub-area, I'll just do a short setup of the...
Does that work for the council?
Yeah.
Fine.
So I guess I turn it back to the mayor at this point just to start with policy 236 there. There's really only 2 policies and 2 programs, plus the additional 1 staff is recommending for this sub-area since it is pretty much built out.
Are there any comments on policy 236?
Sure, I think it's a good idea.
You mean you're talking about now the new program 236B?
Yes.
I think it's fabulous.
Si?
I support the monument. I'd like to see something there saying, welcome to Brisbane for a change, you know, the gateway to San Francisco, or something elaborate. Just joking. I'd like to see that. But I also, and while I support the policy because it does provide a fantastic view for, have you checked with the local law enforcement agency on, because they've had problems in that area, and I think that's something we want to make sure that if we do make it a pull-out, a place for people to view a stop or a rest stop or something, that you know, somebody doesn't come out and suddenly decide to make a left turn across the double of Bayshore and get hidden then on the way. Other than that, I do support the general thoughts.
Deputy?
I think it would be really good to capture on our reputation, Brisbane City of Stars. Would be I think it would be good for us to continue capturing that.
Other comments? Let's move on to 237.
I don't have anything until page 2.
So any other comments on page 1?
I don't have any.
Moving on to page 2, then we get to the southwest Bayshore area.
Thank you, Mr.
Talk
Mayor.
about that?
This sub-area contains 15.2 acres and about 40 parcels that range from 2,400 square feet to 45,200 square feet. The uses range from scattered residential units to warehouse, light manufacturing, propane storage, sales and storage yards, and service shops. It contains, as I mentioned earlier, the city's only mobile home park with 54 units in it, as well as the approved but yet to be built 30-unit Ing residential condominium project. The primary concern is to improve the appearance of this area by reconsidering outdoor uses to improve Bayshore, the look of Bayshore Boulevard, and sign regulations. The area does have significant views to the east, but it's also subject to substantial noise from traffic on Bayshore Boulevard. Public improvements for pedestrians and bicycles, as well as organized parking and landscaping, needs further consideration in the review and can be done with the review of the circulation element. 2 new policies and a few new programs are recommended to address the concerns from the review of this sub-area. In 1994, just to mention, in 94, when the plan was adopted, policy 238 was left simply with the words omitted. And I haven't quite been able to clarify what was omitted. But the plan just says 234 omitted. We would suggest substituting or inserting a policy there, and the policy is in the matrix, and you can discuss it as we go, as you go through the matrix. The staff and the commission was concerned with the range and type of uses that are allowed in the area, especially the outdoor sales and storage. They felt it was detrimental somewhat to the character of the community to have a lot of to allow outdoor sales and uses there. And so as part of the programs for this sub-area, there's program 238A is already in the plan. It just needs to be implemented, again, with a review of the uses that are allowed in this area. This was not something that would happen tonight. It would happen subsequently to the adoption of the plan.
Can you outline the existing outdoor uses that would be impacted by that? And one, of course, is the propane.
Propane sales. There's also a lumber and construction material storage place that we reoccurringly, from an enforcement standpoint, the commission issued a use permit when it changed ownership, and there's kind of a erratic level of storage that goes on there from week to week and month to month, and it's always a problem policing those kind of uses and enforcing that. In the case of the use permit for the particular storage place I'm talking about, and you've probably seen the outdoor kind of construction materials that are stored there along Boulevard, it fluctuates over time, and the conditions on the use permit required that the materials, the volume of the materials, be kept such that the fencing and the building would largely screen them from the view of the boulevard. But as a long-term use, outdoor sales and service or outdoor sales and storage type uses are always a problem to continually enforce and maintain. So I think the commission was looking at the large array of uses, and if you note that attached to your staff report, attachment C was the Bayshore Boulevard zoning district summary, and it had the SCR01, and as you can see, there's quite a number of uses that are allowed. It's quite it's almost like the potpourri of zoning here, where everything from single-family residential to wholesale and distribution, daycare centers, so forth. So the idea was to take policy, program 238, which is already in the plan, that said after adoption of the general plan, review the zoning district regulations to better define an appropriate mix of uses and address incompatible land uses. And the commission, in looking over those uses that are allowed by the zoning ordinance, suggested considering the elimination of outdoor sales and storage uses. Now what that means is you would go back after the general plan was adopted, do a zoning study of that area again, consider those uses, and if you wanted to amend the list of uses that are even allowed by conditional use permit, you would of course do the ordinance amendment procedure for the at the Planning Commission and then at the council. So the council would see that, and the idea is the existing uses would be allowed to continue because they were legally established. They're entitled to continue for their life, really. But if you take them out, then they become non-conforming. And what that does is non-conformity precludes the expansion of their non-conformity to anything more than they already have. And eventually, the idea is you send a signal that you'd like to discourage that to be, so when the property sells, maybe somebody buys it with the intent not of continuing that use, but some other use that's primarily an inside the building kind of use, so that you don't have as much problem with the outdoor storage of materials.
Council feedback on that suggestion?
If that's what it means, Bill, then I would certainly consider it, because I was concerned that, this is something that we're looking at, of kicking out existing businesses, and I wouldn't want to do that, But if it means like a phasing, or somebody sells the property and then what's encouraged is a different use, then yeah, I think that's probably a good way.
If you simply went and made the use illegal going forward, you would in effect be condemning
Right,
the properties.
yeah. Yeah. I don't think we want
I
to
don't think
purchase
we
it.
want to go there.
I don't think we want to purchase it.
Mr. Mayor?
Please.
What the idea is that you wouldn't have to be making any decision one way or the other, but the Planning Commission wanted to go back and study that list of uses a little bit more carefully and bring recommendations to you after the adoption of the plan. It's not an immediate kind of thing.
And I suspect that the council would like to hear that. Am I correct?
Yeah. Well, the only question I have about this, about changing Program 38A, wouldn't it be better if we just moved up to consider the elimination of outdoor sales and storage uses up to policy 238, which kind of falls into that as a policy?
The difference would be when you approve any permits in that district, you make a determination of whether consistent or inconsistent with the general plan. Programs don't have quite the standing of a policy in the general plan. Programs are an action you're going to take independent of the guidance that the policy provides to further the future implementation of the policy. So you could do it either way. You could have that tag on the end of the policy, but that elevates its potency, I would say, a notch.
Okay, I strike what I said.
So without council here, what we're doing is encouraging this to go back to the Planning Commission for its consideration and recommendation for such amended policy and/or programs. Is that
Correct.
Definitely.
And the council would, you might want to indicate whether you prefer that phrase or sentence, consider the elimination of outdoor sales and storage, to be tagged onto policy 238 or remain a part of program 238?
my preference would be to have Hal Topple consider that question.
I prefer where it is, but I agree with your statement about how checking that.
So,
That's-
please.
When you get through, on policy 238, encourage the maintenance and upgrading of the existing buildings and sites in conjunction with new construction and new occupancies. What do you mean by upgrading of the existing buildings? And is there a standard to which we want to upgrade these to, or
I think what
am
the
I
policy...
reading too much into this?
Yeah, the policy, I think it's reflected elsewhere in the plan for another sub-area, and I think that's where the language for that came from. There it is. It's the same as policy 324 under Northeast Bayshore, which interestingly is industrial way. And the idea behind the policy, so this policy is repeated actually twice, but since we're dealing with different sub-areas, it had to be in order to have an effect in different sub-areas. And the idea behind it is it's a policy encouraging upgrading the existing buildings and site. So if somebody was to build a new building and there was an old building, or the site was inadequate in terms of parking or landscaping, then this policy would, in effect, encourage the rest of the site to be upgraded with any new additions or remodels to existing. In other words, it normally, in a way, is anyway. If somebody asks for a development permit from the commission or the council to do something to the site, if the site is already inadequate in terms of certain standards, you have the leverage by the request, the privilege for development in essence. You have the right to go beyond encourage. You could actually require them to do it. So this policy is just in maybe a more friendly way than using your authority under a land use permit to encourage them to do it voluntarily.
Okay. And what about this building at the end of on Bay Shore and Sierra Point that's got that little table out and selling little knicky-knackies out there. Now, that was never a permitted use. And somehow, they got a permit to do that, because I remember we used to send the police after them all the time.
Where
Making
are you
just-
talking?
As you're
On Bay Shore, yeah.
coming north on Bay Shore and you turn left
To go up Sierra Point. To go up
San Bruno.
to go
Oh,
out
okay.
San Bruno, there's that business there, sort of under the water pipe,
Yeah.
and they put a table out there, and they have no parking to speak of.
Yes.
Is that something we've ever investigated as to the?
We've
Not
sent
unless-
police several times. They've stopped the use, and then
Comes
I
back.
checked, it came back, and I checked with City Hall, and they said, oh, well, they got a permit. And I said, well, how did they get a permit to do that?
Check into it. I'm not aware of any enforcement against it, but we can check into it.
So get back to us on that one. Thank you.
And is that what you mean by outdoor sales?
That would be an example.
That would be an example of outdoor sales.
Yeah, that particular use is not something I'm inclined to encourage.
Me neither.
If I could ask, does that, when have you observed that? Was it Monday through Friday, weekends, or any particular
During the week time usually?
week time?
Well, actually,
About
now you
6
think about
o'clock.
it, I had to get some clarification on the staff report, so I drove out there today and I did see that.
So what's,
So, what are you talking about? I was kind of confused, which is not hard to do nowadays. On the staff report, I think one of our parcels that was named by address showed an auto repair shop, but there's nothing there on the very last one. I just take it as a typo, though, unless it's really stealthy.
the 4070 auto sales and repair?
Yeah. Anyway,
We'll check that.
And storage uses, by storage uses, you mean like the problem we've
Contractor,
had
storage
before?
yard, the pipes,
Okay.
and that kind of stuff.
Thank you. That's what I had.
I have a question.
I'm going to take a break for a moment and make sure that's not my car. Go ahead.
Did we take a break?
go ahead. Man.
We're taking a break, I guess.
Yeah.
Didn't leave anybody in charge. We don't know what to do. Right.
Back to the question of program 238, I suppose.
Well, Seppi had a question about something.
Go ahead,
Yes,
Seppi.
I did have a question, and I wanted to know if we are going to allow industrial use at that end, particularly when we're talking about making it to be more naturalistic gateway. Do we?
Where are you talking
Yeah.
about?
What
Yes,
did-
the southeast and southwest. I would like to know whether we're allowing, or we're going to continue allowing any industrial use in that end, particularly when we're talking about making it more naturalistic. The southeast.
And what is your recommendation?
I just want to know whether we're allowing right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have industrial uses, certainly in the southwest area.
My suggestion is to really look at that and questions ourselves whether we would like to continue allowing industrial use if you want to capture the naturalistic and public access and making an overview of the bay. Would that be a good use for us to continue? In my opinion, I think we need to look at that.
I think that was referring specifically to the southeast bay shore of the
That's correct.
entryway, the gateway,
That's correct.
but we're on southwest bay shore, which is a different sub-area.
And I'm sorry, Seppi, you're right. The industrial use is on the southeast side, not the southwest side.
So right now, we're on the southwest Bay Shore,
Thank you.
okay?
Yes.
Yeah, and the southeast side is pretty much built out, other than that
Yes.
little crescent area. So are you talking about applying that to the southwest bay shore?
Right, because we're going to talk about what, putting pedestrian walk. There's a talk to continue pedestrian from, all the way from Burlingame, continue that. If, let's say, the southeast portion of those businesses decide to move on, do we want to continue allowing industrial use in that area,
In the southeast?
southeast?
If one of those businesses move on, we're going to be in deep trouble.
Our largest
I
taxpayer.
get tax
I don't
breaks.
even want to go there, to be honest.
No, I don't either.
Okay,
Let me go down to new program 328D. Develop and implement a sign program.
What page are you on, Mr. Mayor?
I'm still on page 2.
Oh, okay.
It's the last red type in the program we're talking about, land use.
Yeah, 238D is in dog.
Yes, develop and implement a sign program to specifically address Southwest Bay Shore so that signs will reflect the vision of this district as pedestrian scaled. What sort of signs
Mr. Mayor,
would do that?
Mr. Mayor, I think this is there's a more specific concern out of the general concern for the appearance of this district, and I think it would be to encourage, for instance, businesses to have perhaps more monument signs, so that there is a degree of continuity between the signage of the buildings, eventually that evolves over time. You know, as those businesses are replaced with new businesses, do we want, if we can send them a signal of characteristics that would improve the appearance, then perhaps monument signs, or this is again a program, so it's something that would be studied after the adoption of the plan as to what a good-looking set of sign standards might be for that area. But it's all with the hope of seeing it evolve over time, particularly as greater investment goes into Bayshore Boulevard, the look of it, the landscaping, the pedestrian, the bicycles, so forth. You want to enhance the appearance of the building. So this and other programs like encourage the maintenance and upgrading of existing buildings is all part of an overall appearance upgrading over time as businesses change out there.
The thought that you've just expressed doesn't jump out at me from this language at all.
I I've got, explain.
Well, yeah.
I had a question mark.
So why don't we revisit that language and try to state more specifically what it is we're talking about?
Okay?
I'd like to go to the new program 238C if I could, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please.
I see that you had a note down below, says explore opportunities for open space acquisitions to provide a greenbelt separation from South San Francisco. I think that would apply more probably to northwest Bay Shore with Daly City, because South San Francisco right now, we do have that buffer, which is the open space for in perpetuity on the shell mound there. I think where the construction is going on right now, all that coming north to the wall is gonna be left alone.
Subsequent to I would agree, and subsequent to the planning commission meeting, we looked at that a little bit more. There's quite a substantial unused portion of the right-of-way of Bay Shore Boulevard there as well. That's also designated open space. So there's already an element of a buffer there. And then when
Yeah.
you come around the bend, so to speak, you're leaving that behind. You're not seeing it very much anyway. So that's why that comment, the note from staff is that on further review, we didn't find there was much opportunity to get more than was already
Yeah,
existed
but
there.
I do think this program would apply though in the northwest portion of Bay Shore by Linda Vista. So I mean, I would recommend at least
So what I'm hearing is take this one out
of here, yeah.
of here and perhaps restate it in the other area,
In the northwest Bay
in the
Shore.
northwest area.
I think when you get there is some comments about that
Yeah, there is.
later on.
Okay.
And actually, it's also in the open space plan to have a green belt separation. Not sure it's in those terms, but certainly implied that way.
Are there any other comments on page 2? Progress to page 3. At least on the, we'll go through policies 240 to 244. Are there any questions or comments on those? On policy 243, with respect to your suggested changes, I'm marked as strong yes.
Thank you,
Fine.
Mr. Mayor.
Encourage that. Anything else on these policies? Right, then we'll go to the northwest Bay Shore area.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The Northwest Bay Shore sub-area is composed of 7 large parcels of about approximately 83 acres. The northern border is the PG&E substation with parts of Daly City and San Bruno Mountain to the west. Of course, the 7 Mile House fronts on the west side of Bay Shore Boulevard near the intersection with Geneva. To the north of the Brisbane Technology Park are 2 properties, the Peking Handicraft and the Levinson Estate, 9.5 and 22 acres respectively, that are considered to have development potential in the 1994 general plan. And staff has attached to the staff report an air photo with a preliminary analysis of the development potential of those 2 parcels, the Peking and the Levinson. I believe it was the last attached air photo to
The one up on the screen?
with the air photos. Yeah, the one that's odd colored.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
There was an attempt there to consider the constraints to development, which included the easements that affected the property, as well as the open space preserved portions of the parcels, resulting that of the 22 acres on the Levinson property, it was anticipated that about 10.83 acres could theoretically contain development. And if you used, as a theoretical thing, if you used the 30 units, which is the highest density residential the city allows, you could theoretically get 324 units on 10.83 acres. With the Peking parcel, after deducting the constraints, again, easements, open space habitat area, you get down to more like 4.7 acres of the 9.5. So roughly, the constraints cut both these parcels about in half of their gross area that could be developed on. And then if you develop that remaining, in the case of Peking, 4.7 acres, 0.77, almost 5, at 30, you'd have 143 for a theoretical of 467 total. Now, the Planning Commission was particularly concerned with preserving, noted the open space buffer that Councilmember Conway mentioned earlier, the Greenbelt buffer in the open space element, and obviously the parcels have very desirable open space character, a sense of ruralness on Bayshore Boulevard, and really a desirable area to see as much open space preserved as possible, which then resulted in the idea that what development would go on there would be clustered in a smaller area of the site. And also you would want to respect the natural drainages and trees to the maximum extent possible. So in all likelihood, those theoretical build-out numbers are probably considerably off the chart, so to speak. But it gives you a theoretical maximum build-out potential if you took about 50% of the property that was really had some, that wasn't constrained by slopes or natural areas or easements that could be built upon. That is a theoretical kind of maximum calculation.
Is that what that kind of represents there then? Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Right to the left, the gray area is the open space habitat areas. The dotted area is the easements on the site.
That's the water line going through
Correct.
there?
So that you really don't have as much use as might be implied by the gross acreage of the property. The current general plan does not specify a residential density. At least I haven't been able to find it. There's two charts in the general plan, the land use element and table 5, which when we first started talking about the land use element, I mentioned to you, it shows all the land use designations for each sub-area, what the population density and floor area ratio for build-out is. And for Northwest Bayshore, it doesn't indicate a density as for instance, if you're in central Brisbane, under the residential designation in the general plan, you have 2 possible densities of residential development, 2.5 to 14 units per acre, which is considered R2, and 15 to 30 units per acre, which is R3, and that's the highest density the city has in its scheme of densities in the general plan or in zoning of 30 units per acre. So we were just giving, with that figure, we're giving you, if you assumed about 50% of the parcel is really developable, and you applied that highest theoretical density number of 30 units per acre, you would come out with this kind of number. But the real practical reality is, by the time you provide the parking, and you provide the landscaping, and you provide the setback and so forth, it's likely that the number would be less. But we're kind of lacking guidance here because the law does require that if your general plan would allow residential development of a site, it needs to stipulate the number of units per acre that would be allowed. Because in order to assess the impacts of the total build-out of the plan and the environmental review, you have to have that residential density figure. Right now, as it stands, there's planned development trade commercial, planned development sub-regional commercial retail office, which has a intensity figure, and the intensity figure is the floor area ratio, the intensity of building. When you change to allow a residential use or also a residential use, then you have to stipulate a maximum number of units per acre. So the plan should really stipulate that, and it doesn't. So this is something we want to correct.
So there's two questions. Do you specify residential use? And if you do, at what density?
Correct.
And the purpose of this exercise is what?
To comply with the state law, which says that, that you need to provide standards of population density and building intensity if you're, depending on whether you're allowing commercial or residential or both on a property. And the purpose of that is so that you understand the full implications of the whole plan. At the end, you can add up all the theoretical densities and intensities in all the land uses in the plan. So when you do the environmental review that you're required to do, and this is one of the things that we're intending that the Baylands specific plan EIR, under the cumulative impacts section of that document, it's going to evaluate what are the impacts of the final alternative that is adopted by the council. What is the implications of that build out of the specific plan, the Baylands, on traffic generation, on air quality? And so that's why you have to stipulate a figure. Right now, for Northwest Bayshore, you have a figure for building intensity should you do any kind of non-residential project. It would be 2.8 floor area ratio. And it also stipulates an intensity figure, which is the 1.66 to 3.22, that E is employees per 1,000 square feet. Now, this is a result, really, of court cases on the plan that happened back in the 80s, where there was not population density and building intensity standards adopted, and basically the courts were saying, how can you determine that your land use and your circulation element are correlated if you don't know the traffic trips that would be generated from the employees or the housing units or the floor area ratio of the buildings that the plan would allow? So in order to get that correlation, basically what evolved is the necessity to clarify in each designation of the plan, if you're allowing residential, non-residential, or both, what the building intensity population density is. Population density would be if the...
Can you hang on a moment? We're still focusing on the initial question of whether there should be
Yes.
any residential period. Is there thoughts on the council on that subject?
Yeah. I mean, there's always concerns about, you know, about residential in Brisbane, about overgrowing, and these are the numbers that are being kicked around are pretty intense, actually.
Well, just to say, those numbers are only a theoretical number, and the council could say, we could see residential there, but we'd only see a maximum of this amount of units, and then we'll create the statistic, the 20 units per acre, or whatever it is the council's desire in that regard. Right now, I believe as part of the housing element, it was anticipated that residential could go here. And what it gets us back to, ultimately, the issue, the mayor's correct. Is it residential or non-residential? That is question one. Then question two is, if it is residential, or it could be either non-residential, residential, you have to have these density and intensity standards. So it's really the council's prerogative to decide what, if they do want residential, and two, what, at what density do they think is appropriate.
And a lead-in question, perhaps for Clay. Have we, in the last 10 years, heard boo from the owners of the Levinson property?
We may have heard boo, but that's about it. I mean, I remember having discussions with them many years ago when we were working on the storm drain project out there with PG&E, and Levinson was involved in UPC. And at that time, they had indicated that they had some interest in moving forward, and I don't think I mean, I've never heard anything since then, and that was probably 99, 2000.
Mr. Mayor, and they would have been, correct, Ken, they would have been mailed notice of that the city was updating its land use element. We've still not heard anything.
And we've heard nothing from them.
Yeah, I can see some kind of mixed use or live work, but the intensities that you're talking about is a significant amount. And right now, I'm not ready to commit to some type of intensity, because property owner has a right to come in and request an amendment.
Well, what I'm hearing is that we either have to include residential as a permitted use or not. And if we do include it, we have to have an intensity figure.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Well,
Now,
it's
if I
included.
could, if
wasn't
I
it?
just say one other
Please.
thing, is you council, you may remember that when we started the land use element and looking at the sub-areas a few meetings on sub-areas ago, we talked about, when we talked about Central Brisbane, we talked about the state teachers' retirement property and consideration residential. And that at that time I said, if the council didn't want to make a decision at this point, they might desire to wait until we finish the sub-areas, which we're coming close to, maybe at the end of the next meeting in July. And then you could see the 3 or 4 parcels where residential development could possibly go, and you could make some weighing and balancing and decide how much you might be willing to allocate to this under the umbrella of, and the good news is that it looks as if our regional housing needs assessment number is going down. There's been an ongoing discussion between ABAG and the state about the region's overall housing needs number. And what's recently happened is we've gotten information, and I believe Councilmember Barnes is going to a meeting on Thursday of the policy committee. I was on the technical advisory committee. Tim sat in the last meeting, but I knew it was going to happen, is our number has gone down from the 469 to the 401 is now being proposed, which is 24 units less than our regional housing number was for the last housing element going around. So that's kind of good news, because it says it's going to be easier to demonstrate that we have enough vacant land zoned at a density that it could accommodate that number than was the case just a month ago. So the council may wish to postpone, you might want to talk the question residential or no, and then decide what you want the density to be at the end of this process, when we can say, here's what would happen if you put so many on the teacher's property, if you put none on the teacher's property and put them all out here, that kind of balance. You might prefer that.
I'd prefer to do that.
You'd prefer to
Wait.
Wait.
And do it at
have
the
this
end.
discussion at the end?
Yes, yes, yes.
I think it gives us more of the term you use, holistic view, because right now would be more of a piecemeal. And you know, I don't know what I'd be shooting at, and I wouldn't be comfortable with it for one.
You comfortable with that result, Si?
Well, I'm just thinking back, sometime during this process of the Baylands, we talked about transit-oriented housing around that, and people objected to that greatly, and by and large, many have suggested the Levinson tract would be the place to put transit-oriented housing. So I'm not opposed to putting housing there. What density, I have no idea. What is the density of the project that's immediately adjoining that in Daly City, do you know?
Linda
Right
Vista,
down Main Street, yeah.
Dense.
heaven bid if we ever,
Yes.
Yeah. But just so you get an idea of, you know, I mean, it's easy to say, well, the density is going to be this, but unless I can see what it is, I'm not sure I'm going to support it.
well, actually, the density there is lower than what's being proposed,
Okay.
units per acre.
What
Well, okay, just to answer your question, Mr. Mayor, I'm not opposed to housing over there, and it's been talked about for many years, if it ever happens. And the density, we'll discuss that later, I don't know.
what I'm hearing collectively is we put this subject off to a housing units discussion at the end of this whole general plan thing.
Sounds good.
Okay?
I'm concurrent with all these suggested changes.
On page,
Page 4,
11.3.
we're still on 3. Has anybody got any suggested changes to the language on page 3?
and
Language on page 3 is,
Just a quick question on 310.3 near the bottom of the page. It says cluster new development to maximize open space. You discussed that, didn't you, briefly? In other words, are we talking about, I hate to use the Northeast Ridge, but I'm talking about a higher intensity of development and provided more open space as a result of these little clusters? Is that?
Excellent
That's
example,
what you're
yeah,
suggesting? Okay.
essentially.
I'm not suggesting that's your suggestion, but that's, yeah. that's
should
what-
this 310.3 say cluster new residential development? Isn't that what's intended in this?
It could be other than residential development. Under the existing plan, it could be, Northwest Bayshore has planned development sub-regional commercial retail office, so it could be other than
Could be
residential.
either or, okay. Anything else on page 3? Page 4,
one on 315.1 on new policy.
go ahead.
It says, new development should be transit and pedestrian oriented, including but not limited to sidewalks and bus shelters. I'd like to put sidewalks, bus shelters, and bike lanes.
Please. Any other proposed changes on page 4?
I was looking at the first one on the page, it's 311, and it says establish design criteria to enhance compatibility and to retain the natural character of this area.
Rural character?
I guess natural, yeah, rural area. I guess if you're gonna design and put something there, there must be a way to preserve the rural character of the area.
Well, I'm thinking what was meant, that we just tweaked that a little bit, the
Yeah.
commission tweaked that a little bit, was that any buildings would be built with the respect for the natural terrain there. Frank Lloyd Wright, if you will,
Okay.
rather than something more vertical.
I agree with that.
Rather than C.C. Chen?
Yeah.
I can live with that, yes, sir.
Any other changes, suggestions on page 4?
I saw that guy on the History Channel the other night.
Page 5. Suggestions, changes? Blessings?
Blessing.
And hearing no suggested changes. Page 6.
I had more of a, policy 328, so,
328.
yeah, 328.1 on policy 320. It says require improvement of drainage and flooding on Bayshore Boulevard and Industrial Way with new development. What did we eliminate? What was the thought behind eliminating and correction of hillside erosion?
I think that's a typo. I think that was supposed to say, and flooding was supposed to be removed, that there had been improvements to deal with the flooding.
Good.
Okay.
Okay. And didn't we already do an awful lot of work out there?
Indicated that was more applied to the other side. Oh, okay. Yeah, what happened is when we turned to page 6, except for the first policy at the top of the page, we're actually now changed into a new sub-area, Northeast Bayshore.
Even so.
Northeast
Even-
still
even so
has
the hi- yeah.
hillside erosion.
I,
All right, so you're going to change 328.1. Yes?
to leave it as it was, without strikeout on the and correction of hillside erosion. I would leave it there. There is that drop-off at the side of the road. It's not the same character as on the other side of the street, the
Right.
hillsides. But there is that drop-off, and I suppose a concern for erosion there, so that.
Right. And also coming down off of Ice House Hill.
Correct.
Now, at the risk of being optimistic, have we now gone through that which we're supposed to go through tonight?
Pretty much that's the case. You went right on into the northeast sub-area, Industrial Way. There isn't a lot to say about it, except for that question there, and there's only 3 policies in the program to that. I think you just flew right through that, so that was it.
Unless I am mistaken, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Oh, you know what? Yeah. Can we,
Hang on a moment.
yeah, let's
Come
take
on up.
public comment. Yeah. Turn the cameras back on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I've wanted to speak all through this meeting, and we'll try to summarize
Please
some of the
succeed.
issues. I do my best. I do better than some. When you were speaking of the Southeast Bayshore area and the low wall, the gateway, I just wanted to mention that the natural thing that's occurring there right now is shrubs are preventing us from having views, especially when you're driving by. And so I would think that we need to look at our landscaping plans to make sure that we don't end up blocking the views with trying to be natural at the same time. Earlier, you were talking about industrial uses being allowed in TC, and I believe the way it's stated is light industrial, because when I hear the word industrial, I guess I shift over to manufacturing and am concerned that if you use the language industrial real loosely, that down along Southeast Bayshore, we could end up with a proposal for, I don't know, a coal gasification plant. It could be any of a number of uses that we don't want to introduce into that area. So I'm concerned about language and thinking that industrial uses are allowed along there. Regarding conservation and business as usual, and I wrote down 240 and 318 to 319 policies. I think we need more study about what needs to be conserved, although I really appreciate the work of the open.
What page are you on?
Well, it was policy 318, 319 for that's northwest.
So which page is that?
I don't know. I'm just saying the language is is
Page
kind of
five.
weak, and it said I believe it said to refer to the Open Space and Ecology Commission's work. And while they've done good work, I believe we need to have a study similar to what you've done in the Brisbane Acres, where you've identified the plants, where you have carefully characterized the area. Because to sit here in a vacuum and go, this use versus that use, if it's ends up having an environmental consequence, it really needs to be studied more carefully than just throwing out uses. In Sunday's newspaper, there were 2 articles that I would like to bring to your attention. One was on traveling in Italy, that in the piazza at St. Mark's Square, they have had to disallow the use of takeout foods because people purchase from those areas, sit in this lovely piazza that they've created, and then litter. If you've ever driven, we all have, past Bayshore at Geneva, the fence along there is a testament to the fact that that corner is probably the distance that people buy at MacDonald's or 7-Eleven and KFC. They consume their food, they turn the corner, they toss their trash out the window. So in terms of conservation, I think we have to look at uses that are kind of antithetical to the language that we want to bring up about sustainability. If the activities that are going on in these businesses that we're bringing to Brisbane or allowing to be part of our community are, you know, 0 on the scale of, my opinion, goodness in terms of destruction of the universe, in terms of the product that they produce, then that needs to be addressed. And so my one example is the amount of litter that comes from fast food stores, as evidenced by Italy having to ban it. And the second article from the Chronicle is actually a book review called The Silence of the Songbirds. And it's talking about how songbirds are now probably 50% of what they used to be 40 years ago. And you have expressed that this general plan is going to last for 30 years. If that much devastation has occurred in the last 40 years, I think you need to put on the thinking caps as to what we can do to be more protective of our resources. And one of the things that this article speaks about is if we interrupt birds' migration anywhere along the path of taking out their habitat, or like in the birds that winter in South America and summer in North America, that the purpose, the need for those animals is, and I'll quote that, their jobs, birds, speaking of birds, as pollinators, fruit eaters, insect eaters, scavengers, and nutrient recyclers will not get done, and this will disrupt ecosystems and affect everyone on the planet. The fewer the birds, however, the fewer the insects their young consume, necessitating increased human dependence on pesticides whose long-term toxic effects themselves are a major use for concern. So I sit
Dana,
here.
do you have any policy-specific things to like change proposed language or anything like that?
Well, I would
'Cause
start to
I-
look at what San Francisco's doing. I can inquire, and in fact, thank you for asking, because at our next CAG meeting, we have invited Rosie Jenks to speak, and she deals with stormwater management. And there's a lot of, and in fact, this would be part of some of the drainage issues. Will do a presentation about the natural attenuations that are being developed all around the world, and I saw in her presentation to the Viz Valley group that places like Zurich and Portland, where they have like 30 inches of rain a day, it seems sometimes, that they have come up with ways so that we don't end up with the situation that happened in Los Angeles, where the area is so covered with concrete that your stormwater system ends up just being more part of the problem than part of the solution. And so I will ask people at San Francisco what policies they have to see if there is a chance of doing that.
Yeah, if we had some language to work with, because it's difficult to, like, hear what you're saying and then try and
Right.
Apply it. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not
Well,
sure
I
exactly where you're
recommend
at.
you come, or at least ask Michael Barnes to come to the CAG meeting on the 19th and see that, because overall, and this is what I got from the conference, and it didn't even occur to me, our problem in this universe is our waste. And it never occurred to me, I know everybody says, do this a little differently and that a little differently, but in general, it's our waste that's becoming our boondoggle, and we need to think of it differently. And so I'm finding this process of just adding or subtracting one or two words to be ineffective if you're looking at a 30-year plan. And if there's any way you can institute a study or require in here to study this in the near future, not consider or iffy or anything like that, but within 2 years study the following issues or whatever, that would be better than having nothing recognizing the seriousness of our impacts in this world. So I thank you.
Thank you. The prior motion to adjourn was approved. We are adjourned.
Thank you.